I had just moved to a small town in Oregon, desperately trying to leave behind the bustle of city life. I didn't know anyone here. The town seemed quiet, almost deserted at night. That's why, when I stumbled across a night shift job posting at the local 24-hour gas station, I thought, why not? It was the perfect chance to start fresh, and I needed something to keep me busy while I adjusted. The owner, a man named Greg, was a bit strange, but in that unremarkable way, like you'd expect from anyone working night shifts. He looked tired, his eyes sunken, and his voice was raspy, like he'd been awake for days. He handed me a uniform and told me the shift would be simple: watch over the gas pumps, check the security cameras occasionally, and keep the place locked tight. Don't let anyone inside after midnight, he said, with a weird emphasis on the after midnight part. There are some things out there, people, you don't want to deal with. His cryptic words didn't sit well with me, but I figured it was just small-town superstition. Who would want to rob a gas station in the middle of nowhere, right? That first night, I showed up at 10 p.m. The place was dead, and I mean dead. No customers. Just me and the flickering fluorescent lights above. The hum of the fridge and the soft rustling of papers filled the silence. I made myself a coffee, sat behind the counter, and started scrolling through my phone. That's when the first weird thing happened. The doorbell chimed. A tall man in a weathered jacket stepped inside. He didn't say anything, just walked straight to the back, where the restrooms were. He didn't even glance at me. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I looked at him walk past, I noticed he was wet, soaking wet, as though he'd been walking in the rain for hours. But the sky was clear, and I hadn't heard any rain. It was like he appeared out of nowhere. A few minutes later, I heard the doorbell chime again. The man was gone. Just like that. I got up and checked the security cameras, but there was no sign of him outside. He hadn't even left through the front door. I thought I was imagining things. It was my first night, after all. But the unease lingered. That's when I started feeling like something wasn't right about this place. And that was just the beginning. The night dragged on, the hum of the station growing louder in my ears, and my eyes heavy from the monotony. Every now and then, I glanced out the window, but the streetlights barely pierced the dark, leaving the gas station eerily isolated from the rest of the world. Around 2:30 a.m., the doorbell chimed again. This time, a woman walked in. She was dressed in a white dress, barefoot, her hair matted to her face. Her eyes were wide, and there was a strange, unsettling calm about her. She didn't seem drunk or disoriented, but her presence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She slowly approached the counter, her bare feet clicking on the cold tiles. I didn't know what to say, but she broke the silence before I could speak. "Do you have a phone charger?" Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in days. I nodded, pointing toward the charging station behind the counter. She didn't thank me, didn't even acknowledge me beyond that brief sentence. She just went to the station and plugged in her phone. I could tell she was watching me out of the corner of her eye, her face hidden in the shadows. I tried to act normal, but the air was thick, like it was closing in on me. My fingers twitched as I kept watching her. The woman never moved. She just stood there, her eyes still trained on me. The worst part? I didn't hear the door chime when she entered. It was like she materialized out of thin air, standing there in the dim light of the store. She didn't even flinch when the clock struck 3 a.m., and it was then I noticed the time. 3 hours had passed without me even realizing it. Then, just like the man before, she walked out, no goodbye, no acknowledgement that she'd even been there. I ran to the door, locked it, and checked the security cameras, but once again, she wasn't anywhere outside. I could have sworn I'd seen her walking out, but there was no sign of her anywhere. I stood there frozen for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't until about 3:30 a.m. that I finally caught a break, sort of. A regular customer, Bob, a trucker who passed through town weekly, came in. He was friendly, the only person I'd met who seemed unaffected by the stillness of the night. "Place is dead tonight," he remarked, casually grabbing a pack of smokes from the shelf. "Yeah," I replied, a bit shakily. "You ever seen anything weird around here?" Bob paused, his hand halfway to the counter. He looked at me like I was nuts. "Weird? What do you mean?" His brow furrowed. I shrugged, feeling embarrassed. "Never mind. Just, a strange feeling tonight." Bob didn't press me for details. He paid for his stuff, gave me a grin, and left. As he walked out, I noticed the same odd sensation creeping back over me. Someone, or something, was watching me. The flickering lights above me seemed to pulse in and out, almost like they were in sync with my heartbeat. And that's when it happened, the low, creaking sound coming from the back of the station, like something dragging across the floor. My heart stopped for a moment. I stood, frozen, straining to hear. Nothing. The sound stopped as abruptly as it started. I didn't know what to think. But I was starting to realize that Greg's warnings weren't just superstition. Something was out there. I tried to brush off the creaking noise. Maybe it was just the building settling. It had been around for decades, after all. But as the minutes dragged on, the weight of the night started to feel suffocating, like the air itself was pressing against me, urging me to leave. At 4:15 a.m., the doorbell chimed again. This time, my stomach dropped. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to face another strange customer, but my legs moved before my brain could stop them. I looked up to see a tall, dark figure standing just inside the door. The man was dressed in a long black coat, with a hood pulled low over his face. His presence was so heavy, so unnatural, that I felt the blood drain from my face. He didn't move or speak. He just stood there, staring at me. I froze. His eyes, or at least where his eyes should have been, were hidden in shadow. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or staring past me, but it felt like he was inside my head, digging through my thoughts, weighing my every movement. "Can I help you?" My voice sounded too loud, breaking the tense silence between us. The man didn't answer. He simply stepped forward, his footsteps echoing across the linoleum floor. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I backed away instinctively, my breath coming faster. I didn't know what it was about him. It wasn't his size or the way he moved. It was his presence, like he didn't belong in this world at all. As he crossed the threshold into the station, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. His feet didn't touch the floor. It was like he was hovering just slightly above it, his boots never making a sound as he walked. I stepped back again, my fingers reaching for the panic button under the counter. My mind screamed at me to press it, to lock the door, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen. The man reached the counter. His hand, pale and cold, slammed down onto the surface with an unnatural force. He finally spoke, but his voice wasn't human. It was deep, like the sound of gravel scraping against stone. "I'm just passing through. Don't worry about me." I didn't know what he meant by that. Was he threatening me? Was he just trying to scare me? But as soon as the words left his mouth, the room felt colder, like an icy wind had slipped in through an invisible crack. I could see my breath now, visible in the thin air. Without another word, the man turned and walked toward the back of the station. I snapped out of my daze and bolted to the door, locking it immediately. My heart was racing, and I quickly checked the security footage. The man was nowhere to be seen. I ran through the back rooms, searching for him, but I found nothing. The building was empty. No sign of him anywhere. I thought I was losing my mind, but the cold feeling, the chilling, oppressive air, still lingered in the station. I could still hear his footsteps echoing in my head. Just as I was about to call Greg, something else caught my eye. A small, black feather, lying in the corner of the back room, where I had been earlier. I bent down to pick it up, my fingers trembling. The feather was too perfect, too smooth, like it had been placed there on purpose. The doorbell chimed again. I didn't move. I didn't want to answer the doorbell. I didn't even want to move. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened, the man in the coat, the strange feather, the feeling that something was out there, watching me. But the chime rang again, more insistently this time. I hesitated. I glanced toward the back of the station, where I had just checked. No sign of the man. No sounds. It was as if he had never been there at all. The coldness, though, still lingered, and the faint echo of his footsteps seemed to reverberate through the walls. I couldn't ignore it. Someone was at the door. I walked slowly toward the front, my heart pounding. My steps felt too loud, like I was walking through a heavy fog, each movement pulling me deeper into something I couldn't explain. I reached for the door, but before I could unlock it, I saw something through the cracked window, a shadow moving just outside, too tall to be a person, too thin to be anything familiar. The doorbell rang once more. With a shaky hand, I unlocked the door, pulling it open just a crack. A gust of cold air rushed in, but there was no one there. Just the empty road outside, the streetlights casting long, thin shadows that stretched across the pavement. I stared out into the dark, trying to make sense of it. I was about to close the door when I caught something in my peripheral vision, a movement, quick and deliberate, just past the corner of the building. I swung the door wide open and rushed outside, calling out into the night. Hello? Is someone there? My voice echoed into the emptiness, but there was no reply. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I turned back to the station, intending to lock the door and never leave again, when I saw it, something that made my blood run cold. Up on the roof of the gas station, standing perfectly still in the glow of the streetlight, was the man in the black coat. He wasn't moving, just staring down at me. His face was still hidden beneath the hood, but I could feel his gaze, like it was penetrating my very soul. I staggered backward, slamming the door shut and bolting it behind me. I ran to the security monitors, my hands shaking as I flipped through the cameras. The man was nowhere to be found. That's when I noticed something even worse. There were no security cameras on the roof. I was alone in this station. Alone, except for something I couldn't explain. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human. I tried to call Greg, but my phone went dead in my hand. I plugged it into the charger, but it wouldn't turn on. The power in the station flickered, and the lights above buzzed erratically. Then, a voice, a whisper, echoed through the dark. Leave. It wasn't Greg. It wasn't anyone. It was just a voice, coming from nowhere, and yet, it felt so close. So personal. I backed away from the counter, every instinct telling me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. The doorbell chimed again. The doorbell rang, and my blood froze in my veins. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it this time, the presence on the other side, heavy and watching. I stared at the door, my mind screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything but answer it. But my feet were planted, unwilling to move. The air around me felt charged, thick with something unnameable. My hands were trembling, and the silence in the room was deafening. All I could hear was the hum of the lights above and the pounding of my own heart. Then, the doorbell rang again, this time more urgently. I didn't move. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for whatever was about to happen. I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the idea of opening it and facing whatever was out there, or the thought of staying inside, waiting for it to come to me. A sudden slam against the back door jolted me from my trance. The door rattled violently in its frame, and I stumbled back, barely catching myself against the counter. The sound was like a physical blow, and it was followed by the unmistakable scrape of something, or someone, dragging itself across the floor behind me. I turned, but I didn't see anyone. The back room was still empty. But then I saw it, a shadow, slowly growing, stretching across the floor. It was long, dark, and it moved with purpose, almost like a liquid, creeping toward me from the corners of the station. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath in the air again. The shadow slithered forward, curling around my feet, and I realized with a jolt of terror that I couldn't move. It was as if the darkness itself had gripped me, holding me in place. Then, through the haze of fear and confusion, I heard the whisper again. "Leave." But this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was a command, a demand. The shadow at my feet began to shift, twisting and expanding. I heard the faintest echo of footsteps, not from the back room, but from inside the shadows themselves. And then, I saw it. A figure, emerging from the darkness, rising up like something crawling out of a nightmare. It was the man in the black coat. But this time, he wasn't standing on the roof. He wasn't outside. He was right in front of me, towering, his face still hidden beneath the hood, but his presence overwhelming. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The figure raised one hand, and I could see his fingers, long and unnaturally thin, stretching toward me. There was no warmth, no life in the air, just cold, suffocating darkness. The voice, deep and guttural, filled my head, louder now. "You are mine." I didn't know what that meant, but I could feel it. A wave of dread flooded my chest, choking me, suffocating me. And before I knew it, I was moving, pushing past the darkness, running for the door. My feet slammed into the tiles, and I nearly tripped as I reached for the door handle. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me, getting closer, closer, closer. I yanked the door open and stepped outside into the cold night air, slamming it behind me. I didn't dare look back. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. The streets blurred around me, the dark shapes of the town flashing by in a panic. But the whole time, I could feel that presence following me, him, a shadow that never left, always just out of sight, but always there. I didn't stop until I reached the highway, where I finally flagged down a passing car. The driver, a young woman, looked at me like I was insane when I begged her to take me anywhere. But she didn't hesitate. She drove me to the nearest town, and I never looked back. The next day, I tried calling Greg. The phone rang, but there was no answer. I called again. Nothing. I drove to the station, but it was locked up tight, the sign hanging crooked on the door. I never worked another night shift. And now, months later, I still see him sometimes, the shadow, the man in the black coat. Every time I close my eyes, I feel him there, watching me. I know he's waiting for me to return to that gas station, waiting for me to make a mistake. But I won't. Not again. And if you ever find yourself in a quiet town at night, far from anyone, and you hear that doorbell ring, just remember, some things don't stay gone. I thought I had escaped. I thought the nightmare was over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me. Something I couldn't outrun. It followed me, lingering just beneath the surface of my everyday life, waiting for me to let my guard down. I moved to another town, far from that small, isolated place in Oregon. I found another job, settled into a new apartment, and tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But even in the bright, busy city, I could feel it, a presence. A dark, suffocating weight that pressed in on me at night. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear the faintest sound. It's subtle at first, like a soft tap, then a slow, deliberate scrape, just like the noise that came from the back of that gas station. It always happens when the clock strikes 3 a.m. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face it. I tried reaching out to Greg, tried asking if anyone had seen anything strange after I left. But no one answered. And when I looked up the gas station online, there was no record of it. No address. No history. It was like it had never existed at all. Like I was the only one who remembered. But then came the dreams. At first, they were vague, flickering images of the gas station, the man in the black coat standing in the shadows, his long fingers stretching toward me. But they grew worse. More vivid. More real. Every night, I would find myself back at that station, trapped in the same loop. The doorbell ringing. The man walking through the darkness toward me. His voice. The cold. And the worst part? Each time, the man would whisper in my ear as I slept. You can't hide forever. I woke up every morning drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as if I had just run miles. I started checking my locks compulsively, always looking over my shoulder, always feeling like something was behind me. But there was never anything there. I don't know what he is, or why he chose me. I don't know if he's real or just a manifestation of my fear. But one thing I do know, he's still out there. He's still